Welcome everyone. This is Airbnb Success with Robin Booth, and today I've also got one of my guests, Miguel Martins. And these conversations that we're going to be having in our Thursday slot are really going to be about how you can utilize, grow, leverage, monetize, profit from, and of course use Airbnb as a possible investing strategy to create more income and of course achieve some of those goals that you're really wanting to achieve. Really what we're wanting to do is answer some of your questions and create those insights that would allow you to venture forward in actually taking that step in using the strategy for yourself and of course to create the life that you love to live. For many of you who perhaps know some of my story, I started Airbnb many years back. And for me, one of the things that was so important was to create the life that I wanted to live. And I knew that I needed to find diverse income streams that would make sense and support me in the cash flow, as well as building assets to live the kind of life that I love to live, which means having time, having funds, having flexibility, and doing those things that I love doing. Last year, I think I calculated that I spent 155 days out of the country doing different things and actually, like I mentioned, creating a life that I love to live. And while that was happening, the Airbnbs were in process. While that was happening, they were running and functioning a lot with the automation that I'd put in place, which is obviously a strong point, right? We don't want to just have another job managing Airbnbs. And that whole process has really escalated into something that's just powerful and is incredible. And part of why I had asked Sapin to work with me in this conversation we're having now is because this is around answering some of those questions that will support you in taking that next step. And of course, sharing some of the updates in what we see are the trends that we see are the latest releases from Airbnb. And we're just going to be touching base with that so that you can actually get a whole lot of that information really up to date. But I thought today would be really a good one to have Miguel online. Many of you know Miguel, right? He is a famous Sapin face partner, participant in many ways. He is one of those people who just gives so generously of his time and effort and insight. And why I thought he'd be great here is, one, he's already got the authority and trust of many of us. I've used Miguel as well for the financing of my properties, and we know many of you have already reached out to him to do that. But what's really fascinating is, if you don't know, Miguel left his corporate work last year. He took the plunge and said, I'm going to create the life that I love to live. And he's going to do that through property and other ventures. And in December, he listed his first Airbnb. And I thought that would be a fantastic conversation to have, because many of you perhaps are also just on the verge. You've heard about this being such a good revenue stream. And we might touch base on that. Miguel was witness to it, that one of the people in our group here on Sapin actually in December alone, off one property, generated 500,000 Rand profit off one property in 1 month. Now that's insane, right? So it works. We know it works. But I thought, let's actually chat to Miguel, and he's about to launch his second Airbnb listing. So this is all really relevant. This isn't just two experts talking theory. This is on the ground, real work here. And of course, it's really great for us to have your questions so that we can see what's going on and actually to share those things. So Miguel, really welcome.
Hey, Robin.
And it's nice to actually have you in a different context as opposed to like talking about finance and bonds. This time we're going to talk about, you actually took that plunge and you have now successfully added Airbnb as a strategy to your already extensive portfolio. So how was it for you leaving corporate and getting going on this?
So 4 months ago, I would have been on a webinar or this kind of discussion, and my background would have been, the APSA building, a lot of red in the background, etc. Right, and it was a big decision to leave. Now I was with APSA over 17 years, and actually I left APSA, went back to APSA. I was actually with APSA for I think 23 years all in. So it's quite a career. I went to various elements in the bank, and I landed up at my favorite and last job, which was in home loans, dealing with investors. And I think what I did get through that experience was what investors were doing in the market, and that really helped me put together a plan to exit corporate, leave the good people and then the place I had at APSA Home Loans. Really enjoyed my time there, but really felt it was time to kind of move on to the next part of my journey. And it wasn't without having a plan, but it's been very, very different. Really, if anyone has left corporate, it is quite something to do so. It is scary, it takes a bit of courage and sometimes a bit of blind faith as well. Actually, a lot of blind faith, actually. But having people to rely on, chats with yourself, with other investors, Andrew, etc., and the team has really made it possible. And Airbnb was always going to be part of that strategy. I've got Airbnbs in just around Sandton. My first Airbnb is around Sandton in Johannesburg. I haven't necessarily gone the tourist routes on the coast, etc. I think that's nice and flashy. I'd like to get there one day. But right now, I'm focusing what's within my control, what's close by, and really launching that. Sorry, I'm getting calls here, and I'm expecting, and the intent is actually to have multiple Airbnbs within the next 6 months. So this will become a business line, which I'm going to have next to my rental portfolio.
Well, we're certainly going to touch base on that. What I'm also really interested and curious about is, what attracted you first to the Airbnb? And of course, like I said, there might be people who are watching here. We obviously see more people joining as we're just having this conversation. Is, for those that are listening here, we're having some chats and obviously looking at how to give you the information that you need. So if you've got questions, please do ask them, whatever they are, and we'll definitely get them answered. And in between that, we're going to just keep exploring what it is that, it looks like in this case for Miguel. So Miguel, while we see people, asking some of their questions about it, and the classic questions may still be around, well, what happens about damage? What happens if my guest creates damage? I actually saw that in a group just the other day. Someone said, oh, I really want to start Airbnb, but my building doesn't cover insurance for the damage that a guest makes. And I'm like, wow, that actually Airbnb covers that, up to $3 million now. Used to be $1 million last year. In January, they lifted that to $3 million per booking, not per unit, per booking, whenever that is, right? And that's around liability, insurance, damage to linen, damage to the building itself. So it really is a fascinating context that we're looking about. So your questions might be a whole lot of stuff. And actually, I want to get to one of your niches, which is pets. You actually allow pets to come in, and you know that Airbnb has pet insurance as well for you, the host. So if that guest's pet damages your place, chews through the table, makes the carpets, really terrible, Airbnb has an insurance cover for that, so it really takes a lot of that stress away. So these are the questions that maybe people are going to ask. And of course, that's why we want to, answer them. We're the experts in here, really giving them that up-to-date information. So my question to you first is, last year, when you hadn't done any Airbnb, what had actually prevented you from triggering it, even though it looked like it could be something important?
So these things are all easy in theory. And it's easy to sit and to listen to somebody who's doing it and to go and do the course. I did your course, Robin. And it's good to do in theory. At some point, you have to put some money down. You have to. In my case, I'm converting one of my multi-let apartments into Airbnb. So first thing I had to do was not re-sign a new lease with a tenant. They vacated. So all of a sudden I had a vacancy, and then I had to go and furnish. And if you furnished a 2-bedroom apartment recently, you're well into the 50,000 plus kind of category. So it's a real commitment. And of course, on the back of that, I'm no longer working. So the funds I have is the funds I have. So there's a certain amount of risk. How you manage risk is I think through two things. One is make sure you've got as much knowledge and experience around you as possible. And the second thing is make sure you got people around you, people who are in it, who I went to and said, and I'm just trying to understand the finer details so I can manage that risk. But at some point, I still have to take the plunge.
Okay, so you mentioned what your current that strategy that you list was taking one of your existing units that you've got converted by the property, and you had to put a certain amount of capital in, just so that doesn't shut down someone else who's listening. The possibility is, There are also the possibilities with that you can go and rent a furnished apartment, which means you don't have to put down money for the furniture. You're just putting down rent, but you're then going to put it on Airbnb and get income that is probably close to double what you're paying in rental, right? We call that the rent-to-rent strategy, rental arbitrage. So just what Miguel is sharing here is one strategy, but of course we know that there are other ones depending on your cash flow, right? Some people do diverse kind of strategies around, but that was your one. So in your case, I think you also mentioned community. We know that having people around who are doing something similar, who prove that something can be done, right? We don't want just to have theory. If we're always going to talk about the theory of possibility, we're never going to get anything done. We know that we're action takers. We take the plunge. We've seen huge growth in the Airbnb over the last few years, and it's fantastic to be on that leading edge, leading wave, because it's going to just keep getting stronger and stronger. And we see that more and more investors are actually looking for an alternative and are looking for higher returns. And of course, that's there, right? So I'll also just, ask Daniel in the background there, who's just supporting us. Dan, maybe you also need to just put in the links there that if people want to just check what the free, free course is, the content around actually, what was my journey? How can it be done? There are examples of different types of Airbnb, because at the end of the day, this is about you creating what's important for you. So Miguel, then, yes.
And maybe just a comment, as I looked at my area, and I think the good areas are going to be very popular and they're going to seem saturated. But a sense I got when I went and clicked on and looked at the various options is that there's a lot of people doing Airbnb because they have an empty cottage on their property. They converted a garage. They retired. It really is mom and pop, if I can call it that. Or maybe they have one apartment and they thought, well, instead of doing a long-term rent, let me try this Airbnb thing, right? And you can see that they're doing it. There's an amateur way about going it, and there is a sophisticated professional way about going at it. And I think that, having chosen that within, so I launched first week of December. And by the end of December, I was a super host, and it was by really following some of the professional tips and learnings that we get out of doing the course, speaking to the people, and just really surrounding ourselves with those in the know. So I'm set. January, slow start. It's just slow start to the year, but all of a sudden the rest of January is booked as of yesterday. So just wow, just all of a sudden just comes. So, but really looking at it not just as a hobby or as a side thing, but actually taking a proper business view, it makes all the difference.
Okay, so I like that last word, business. This is the business of short-term letting. We're not also just restricting it to Airbnb. There are many other platforms, as we know, the Booking.com, the Verbos, the Lekker Slaps, the multiple ways of utilizing a need of short-term letting. And of course, there's some things around that, but I think what you really liked as well is, a lot of people say, there's so many Airbnbs out there, how can I compete? And I've often said, and I'll say it again, I'm not worried about how many there are, because if there are a lot, it means there's demand. All I have to do is be better than them, and I'm going to totally score it, right? I mean, I often share, and Miguel, you were part of that journey when last year, January, so 2022, when I bought that one penthouse apartment, and, if you look along my area, it's just, because it's on the beachfront, right? It's just covered with Airbnb listings. And I said, well, I don't have to, I just have to be better than them. And of course, South Africans are actually not very professional. We see that in general in property, in normal letting, in multi-lets. It's just, we know that. And of course, that example was that property cost me, about 3.7 purchase, but last year, so 3.7 million, 3.6 million, generating 720,000 Rand gross income on the short-term letting, right? In 1 year. You're just not going to find that anywhere else. So again, we know this works. And of course, that's why you're getting that. So based on that, I see there's some questions coming in, but while I just read them, Miguel, so now that you are a month and a half in, what comes up for you around this? What's your strategy around using this? And, what would you suggest to someone who's still sitting on that fence?
So I guess two questions. What is my strategy and my suggestions to those who kind of looking at it? So I looked at it for about 6 months. before I actually got into it, right? I was still at work, I was looking around, and it's part of my exit plan, and a way to cover my income. I have a property portfolio, but I need still I still have an income gap, so I needed to cover that. My strategy is to bed it down this year with my Airbnbs is to expand, probably between another 4 or 5 actually. So really going aggressively and build a business line. I have a rental portfolio, long-term rentals. That's a business line. My second business line is going to be short-term rentals, through Airbnb and using some of the other platforms, booking.com, etc. Where I am right now is I'm still in the starting blocks. I'm still getting to understand the Airbnb platform. It's a very interesting platform, but a lot of functions. Take some time to get your head around those. Expand to some of the other platforms. Understand how to maximize that. For anyone wanting to get into it, is kind of looking at it and thinking, is this a consideration? I think do your homework, understand it, speak to the professionals, and when you speak to people who have an opinion on it, they're either going to give you too good an answer, or they're actually going to probably give an answer that discourages you. Speak to the people who are running it like a business, who are running it as professionals. Do your homework, run the numbers, but at some point take the step, and then run with it, and then make it work. They all make the decision, and then adjust until you get it stable.
Yep. Okay. So again, it's like we want the right information at the right time, and we want to make it happen, right? So all of that. That's what we want the information of the people who are doing it, not just are theorizing about it. And part of actually the doing of it is being up to date with what is changing, because sometimes stuff's changed. Airbnb does change its algorithms and how it searches for stuff. So we need to know that we're evolving with them. It's an organic process. And from my side, I always want to be on the top of the game. I want to be listing first. I want to be chosen first. I want to be booked up. I want to have everything in place. I want to be able to have time. A lot of people talk about, well, there's so much, like legwork involved, but actually there's a high degree of automation that we can bring in, so, and we talk about all of that. But Miguel, one of the questions we've got here is from Louisa, and we'll put her comment on the screen here. And she talks about one of the biggest challenges of the possible rent-to-rent is asking, or someone goes on a listing and sees that there's an estate agent. And then they go and ask the estate agent and said, oh, I like this property. I'd like to do Airbnb in it. And the agent just basically shuts it down. Says, no, the owner's not open to it, a whole lot of different things, right? So that is one of the stumbling blocks if you're going through that. So, of course, you can also just go straight to the owner. A lot of our listing platforms have the functionality where you can say, I only want to see the adverts by the owner listed as opposed to estate agents. But, from my side, I'm looking for ease. I want something that is way more easier than having to just go one by one by one. And often agents who have a large database can actually make that a lot easier. So one of the strategies I suggest, Louisa, that you could try is, and I share a lot of this in the course, and I give you the word by word scripting that is important, is instead of seeing a listing, going to see the viewing with the agent, and then dropping the bomb to say, well, actually, I want to use this for Airbnb. And then the agent gets upset with you because you've just wasted their time because they're going to shut it down. What I do is I go online, I see if there's a listing, I look to see who the agent is, and I contact that agent beforehand and say, hi, my name is Robin Booth. I'm an investor. I do a whole lot of different things in the rental market. I would love to come into your office and share my strategy with you to see if you have any fitting or any listings that will be a good fit. So straight away, that's a different context. And I go in there and I say, this is what I do. This is the success that I'm getting. This is how it looks. And this is why it's a good fit for you and your possible landlords. Now it's in their space. It's in their office. They're not pressurized. And of course, then I'll go into the scripting of why it's actually beneficial to them and the landlords. Number one, they're not going to lose on their commission as being a rental agent. Number two, there's going to be even less maintenance that they have to worry about because I'm taking care of a large portion of that. And some of you might say, well, why would I do that? And how does that look? And we just don't have the time to go into all those nitty gritties, but the actual scripting of why this is going to be beneficial to the landlord is so important. And I think just if you just have to put yourself into the shoes of the landlord, the kind of worries that they have is, oh, there's going to be so much damage. I don't know who's going to go into that apartment. There's going to be so much wear and tear. All these kind of reasons that they come up with of why it's not a good idea. They're very simple counter objections to that, which is, number one, your place will be maintained and cleaned 2 to 3 times a week. Like, do you think your normal 12-month lease tenant is going to clean top to bottom by a professional company? Not even once every 6 months. Well, we do it every time there's a booking, right? The whole place gets cleaned because our business requires that this thing looks really great. Number two as well, damage. Well, $3 million per booking. So if anything gets damaged, it gets replaced or sorted out, and very quickly. None of this back and forward claims and whose fault is it? It's just sorted out, right? So all these objections start to be eroded, taken away, and suddenly the landlord sees, wow, this is a much better option than actually renting out to the person down the road. I mean, one of the objections I often hear is, well, we don't know who's going into your place. Like, there's no control. And I'm like, so if you rent to someone else for 12 months, are you aware of who they invite over for dinner, of the parties they throw on Saturday night, watching the rugby or doing something else? You have no control over that. I have control over my guests. I can state they have to be verified. They need to have government IDs in place. There's a whole lot of stuff. There's, all those things, because unfortunately South Africans just don't understand how this all works and why it could actually be in their best strategy. So Miguel, I know that you and I have had conversations about noise monitoring software, digital locks for security, cameras that control a whole lot of stuff. Like, what are your thoughts about some of those objections that landlords have?
So I think we should welcome them, because going in there with a professional approach, thinking through some of the points you just made and being ready for those questions already puts you ahead of all those let's give it a go Airbnb hosts, right? And I think it just sets you up. You just have to. So it's a bit of a volumes game. You got to find the estate agent who's willing to do it, and you just got to try 10% harder than all the others who kind of give up and trying to do this. So by being professional, by being persistent, by building those relationships, and you got to get the first one. The first one is hard, I think. Second one is less hard, and the third one is much easier, right? Just like anything else. If you
actually, Miguel, just on that, it reminds me of the person who's signing their first bond documents. They go to the bank and they spend, it's like the bank gives them this load like this, and they're sitting there like, how am I just going to sign every page? Because remember, the bond the bond person is just saying, sign here, sign here, sign here. And you're like, what? Like, really? I'm just signing without reading? So I agree, by your 15th, 16th property, it's like, where do I just sign? And your signature gets shorter and shorter and shorter because of all the documents you have to sign, right? So definitely, your first one is always the most stressful.
And the benefit of having spoken to, a handful of agents before you get one who's willing to work with you is that they get to know you as the Airbnb person. And when they come around to the idea, they'll remember you. So you're actually building a network of agents will come back to you. And of course, that agent who does work with you and who has a positive experience, next time he or she sees a property that fits with your criteria, she'll be coming to you immediately. Why? Because you're looking at it from a business perspective. There's no haggling around price. They know what you want, and it's a great way to expand.
Yeah, and they know the service you're providing actually does their host or the landlord even better. So here's an interesting fact, Miguel. I mean, I think we had chatted about this also sometime last year. Is I had a national franchise approach me. They were a rental estate agency, so one of the big brands nationally, right? Offices in all the different cities. And they said to me that they are getting an increasing amount of their standard book, their landlords, who are saying, do you do Airbnb? Because we're interested in it. So those landlords are starting to look for alternatives, and they actually do. They go approach the agents and say, do you actually do Airbnb? And the agents are like, no, we know nothing about it. We don't know how to do it. So we do know that there are more and more people looking for it. And I think that it just goes to show that people are becoming more business savvy around, hey, can I actually get something more out of it? Can it, can this actually make a difference?
And those estate agents also getting to discern between the professional and the amateur Airbnb host.
Yep. So before we just move on to the next question, which is when is a good time to start? And I see that, Gordon has mentioned that. I want to just add and close off the question that we had earlier, which was when I go and speak to an agent, I would also go with my kind of standard terms and my pitch, right? In other words, I'd have a piece of paper that outlines all the things about why this is a good fit for the landlord. And I've realized that if I have to go through an agent to get to the landlord, there's double the education that has to happen. Because if I just speak to the agent, I'm relying on that agent conveying what I'm trying to say to the landlord, and we get lost in communication. I don't trust that they know how to communicate this effectively to the landlord in such a way that the landlord is going to know that. So I take my piece of paper and I'll send it to them digitally afterwards. That basically outlines these are the benefits of doing this compared to long-term letting. Here are previous testimonials from other landlords of why they have come to me with more properties in their portfolio than just the one that they initially gave me, right? We've seen that landlords will come back to you and say, you know what, I actually have more properties around the city. Would you like those as well because of that great experience? So it's not just a happy-go-lucky, let's just ask someone, phone them and do it. There's actually a strategic way to increase your attraction of properties. And I think a lot of people who've heard me speak and happen know that I'm very strategic. I'm calculating, I'm specific about what I do. And of course, that's why I get the success that I do, because I'm going to be focused on those strategies. I do not leave anything to chance. And you know that we had that conversation actually just 2 days ago when you talked about, why is January empty? And I'm like, hey, we don't just wait and just hope. We in action about reapplying our strategies. And it makes a difference, because we're in action. So I'll be interested to know what you think about this. So Gordon has a question here about the rent-to-rent strategy. He's just talking about it in a certain area, in Blouberg beachfront. That's my home turf. And a lot of people ask me, Robin, why do you share all your insights and stories about Blouberg? Because then everyone's just going to go there. Well, you're going to have to come up against me. So that's fine. I'll take that on, because you're just going to be one of the other hundreds around me. And I know that what I'm doing is successful and is still going to, be successful. There's such a demand for good listings. So, I'm not too concerned at this moment about competition from that perspective. But when to start it? Should we start it in winter? Should we start in summer? You listed December. Yes, maybe you're not in the beachfront, but you still did it right at the end. And many people might argue and say, well, Joburg empties out, in December. But what are your thoughts around when should someone start?
Sure. So I was quite concerned actually about listing in December, because I really thought that my typical guest was corporate, and corporates aren't traveling into Joburg in December. They're traveling to Blouberg, right? And but so my answer to that would be, so you're running this like a business. When is the right time to start? Well, you're going to be there for 12 months of the year. So run the numbers. There are some great sites out there that give you some occupancies throughout the year. Robin might be able to mention them, and give you a sense for what to expect. The reality is there's always a market. It depends on what price and at what offering. So I think go in for the long term. You're not going to be renting this for 3 months. You're going to be there indefinitely, ideally, if you're running this as a business. This is going to be your first of 10. So start where you start. What you probably don't want to do is start at the peak where you all of a sudden flooded with bookings, and then a small issue you might have missed becomes a big issue. Now you start getting bad reviews. So on the converse, I would say you don't want to start at the height of any season. So I think start where you start. Start with the right approach. Get the pricing right. Make sure if with the rent-to-rent model, make sure that the numbers work and that you're able to service the rent for your landlord. But start where you are. Start with what you have, and I think just get going. Surround yourself with knowledge, and find a network of other investors, businessmen doing Airbnb, and just so that you can compare notes with them. There's nothing to like that.
Yep, cool. So, yeah, it comes back to that question often we ask in property: when's the best time to invest in property? And like everyone is, 20 years ago. That's when you should have started. When's the next best time? Now.
Robin, you bought your penthouse, right? The one you mentioned earlier on. You bought it, in the second half of COVID, right? When everyone else saying,
we're still in heavy COVID. And as we got to
busy?
peak season, they shut down all the borders again, and I was still fully occupied.
That was the worst time to start your business.
Yep. And I'm immensely grateful for just getting stuff done, right? I mean, that's what it's all about. And of course, I benefit from that. There are a couple of other questions, and I just want to make sure that we're also just wrapping it up, because this is, these are continued conversations that we keep happening, and I'm sure that there can be loads of conversations. I do see those questions from James there about Airbnb and upfront costs, but I also just want to mention why I think this year is going to be really important, and why I think, and what I think we need to be doing as Airbnb investors and hosts that are going to make a difference or give us a strategic edge. So I'll come to James's question now that we see there on the screen. One of the things that we've noticed with this new load shedding schedule that we've got is it's here to stay. And when people do Airbnb, before it used to be okay that you just kind of had, these little small backup lights and candles. That's not going to be okay anymore. If you actually want to be to the forefront and be chosen above other people, because a lot of South Africans are stingy. They're keeping their money. They're not willing to invest in, like I say, backup batteries or something like that. As an Airbnb host, the moment you add that, you're going to be dominating the people around you. You're going to be outperforming the competition, because no one wants to go away and then just stay in the dark for 12 hours in a day or in the 24-hour period, right? Our stage 5 and stage 6. So having those kinds of things is absolutely essential. And Miguel, as you and I have discussed, I have photographs of my backup batteries on my listing, and it states in the titles, because I want people to know we are on top of our game. You also have an advantage, for example, that you are pet friendly. It's going to be a growing concern. One of the fastest growing markets in the US is the pet industry. Pet insurance, pet hotels, pet daycare. Yes, pet daycare, you pet creche, you drop your dog off at pet doggy creche, where they spend the day playing and walking and learning tricks and getting whatever, and then you pick it up on the way home. No longer do you just lock your pet up at home and go. It's like, no, this is my child. So it is a massive market, and it hasn't yet fully hit. And you just told me this morning that you just got a 7-day booking, I think it was yesterday or today, because you are pet friendly. And this person needed to bring their pet along for numerous reasons. So look at being pet friendly. And remember, I said there's pet insurance, right? It covers that if there is a damage or you have to clean carpet. So there's a whole ways we need to do it. So definitely make sure you've got good backup batteries for lights, Wi-Fi, and TV, that you are looking at pet friendly as a possibility, because that's going to be really important. And of course, that you're just actually in action and making things happen, and that you're providing a professional service. And I think keeping those things in mind, you're really going to be successful. So as I just read the last question, Miguel, and just gather my thoughts, any comments on what I've just shared about what you think is going to be the dominant factor for this new year coming up?
Yeah, so I think as you get more professional Airbnb hosts, that bar increases, right? The bar, the minimum that if you want to attract and retain the right type of guests. And I think going into Airbnb and just providing a nice, comfortable bed with pillows and a nice picture on the wall, that's not enough. That's not enough. You have to set yourself apart. So in an environment that's crowded, and you don't want to price yourself. You don't want to be the cheapest. You don't want to win like that. You're not going to make any real returns. So how do you price yourself appropriately, still competitive, but provide 1, 2, maybe even 3 really differentiated amenities as part of your Airbnb? I think that's how one wins, and that is a forever moving scale. There'll be something different 6 months from now. 6 months from now, you're going to go do something different, etc. But always, whatever you put in, you make it as little maintenance as possible. You don't want to be going in. So if you're thinking of putting chocolates on the pillow, don't do that. Then you're going to be going to the Airbnb 3 times a week. that doesn't make you competitive. You got to think of other things that'll work by themselves. That makes it competitive.
Yeah. Okay. So there are all those tips and tricks, and we know that we cover extensively in the content and the courses, because we want to cover all those things and give everyone the most information. Here's a question, as we can see there, like, what are the first steps to do rent to rent, and what are the upfront costs? Well, that can actually be really minimal. My recommendation is to look for an apartment that you can do a 12-month lease, or even just a 6-month if you just want to test it. And that is furnished. So literally you're just coming in, paying the deposit, paying the first month rent, and you might need some, like maybe an extra set of linen if they don't do linen as well. There are a couple of things you might just have to tweak to fix up, but basically with very little money, you can actually get that going. And that is why it's such a game changer, is that you can actually generate income from literally day one, the day you open your listing. And I share why, right? Because let's say that we're in January now. Let's say I find a place for March. So I've got a month. I can already open that listing up now online and get bookings, and I haven't even taken occupation of the property yet. Which means that the 1st of March, the moment I take occupation, I could actually already have bookings on that day. Like, I don't know where else you can do that in any business, start generating income from day one. So I think it's very exciting to do that. Here is the trick for many people who say like, oh, but it's a risk. You're taking out of a lease. All you need to do, definitely get permission from the landlord that you can sublet on Airbnb. Put that into the lease. The landlord gives me written permission to sublet this unit on short-term rental properties like Booking.com, Airbnb, and I give that wording specifically in the course as well. Secondly, if you consider that there might be a risk that maybe this doesn't work, you put a clause into the early cancellation which says, if in the event that I choose to terminate this lease early, I can find an alternative tenant at the same kind of price on by the landlord and the agent to be a replacement. Then if there's no loss of income to the landlord, then there's no penalty to me. So suddenly you can actually get out of a lease if that's the problem without there be incurring a whole lot of penalty. So you can go into this saying like, well, after 3 months, if it doesn't work, I can exit, right? And that gives huge security for a lot of startups, because they're like, I don't want to end up paying for 6 months rent if it doesn't work. And you can actually mitigate that as well in an ethical way, not in a disrespectful way. So all those kinds of things actually really do help. So I hope, what was it? I think it was Grant. What was his name? Was it
James?
James, if that gives you some indication of that. Okay. So let's just check. So Miguel, your plan in this year, how many more are you going to get?
So, one Airbnb is interesting. It's a bit of fun, it really doesn't kind of hit the mark in terms of income. 10, well, you asked me this year, I'm planning on 6, but I'm actually planning on exceeding that plan. I really want to scale. This is a business. There are some significant businesses out there that have dozens of Airbnbs in their books. I'm not necessarily there, but I'm looking at a good number. And to do that, I've got to have the right products. I've got to have the right systems, the right structures in place, the right support in terms of cleaning companies, etc. So I'm treating this like a business, and I'm building up like a business, and I'm getting good advice and good from either coaches like yourself or from others who have the experience. So together we grow, and then I find that I'm starting to give that group some inputs where they're learning from me as well. So it's really great to be in that, and that's how I get there.
So you mentioned as well, just my parting comment on this, that one property, fun, maybe it doesn't actually generate a lot. Well, that depends on what you're doing and where it looks, right? Because I share in that introductory course my journey, which started off, we rented a house. We just used one room at the front. That room paid for 75% of the whole year's rent. We then went away over Christmas and let the whole house out, and that paid for the remaining portion. So we lived for free, went on an overseas holiday for free, right on the beachfront in Bloberg, right? So one property, You don't even have to do it as a professional business. It's just like we lived for free and went for holiday for free, and we got to live on the beachfront. So it can just be one property, right? It depends if this is, if like, I love it that you're taking this seriously, making a business, and you're going to grow it, because that's what you are, you're an entrepreneur. There might be people here who just want to do their granny flat in their garden, and that will pay for maybe 75% of their bond payments for the whole house. You know,
Absolutely.
that is possible. This isn't just about, oh, I don't actually have the time to do a full business of Airbnb. It's not like that at all. It could be side hustle, it could be, you know, just once in a while. It could just be holiday letting over Christmas if you have a great place. So there's so many different ways to look at it, right?
Absolutely. I mean, my existing suite, you know, in a normal month, I'm expecting to earn about 15,000 a month. You know, so if that was, you know, gross, obviously before taking costs and etc. But if that was a converted garage or a converted cottage on my house, then you know those costs are sunk. So that's actually pure profit. You know, so and that's significant. I mean, that is quite significant, and that's nowhere near the kind of rentals that can be charged for Airbnbs in more high demand areas. So that's still very conservative.
Yep. Well, as we finish off, I think, you know, one of my last comments, and I've alluded to it, is pretty soon in one of our conversations here, I want to bring into the conversation, you know, one of those people who are doing the rent-to-rent strategy, but they're paying 120,000 Rand a month rent on a property, right? So it's not like, should I go get a one-bedroom apartment for 10,000 Rand or 15,000 Rand? No, this is 120,000 Rand per month on a rent-to-rent, right? Like, so this isn't about, oh, it's only just small scale properties. It's like, no, this could be whatever you're looking at. So it's super exciting to see what's coming on. Maybe that'll be in the 2 weeks time. So we'll have a look at when that is. But
that's a multi-million rand business right there, right? One property.
Correct.
Exactly.
And, you know, based on that, that's why he got 500,000 Rand profit just in December. He charged 40,000 Rand per night for his listing. And
he got it.
It's like,
no, fantastic. Okay. But that doesn't happen by accident, right? That happens. It's pre-planned. It's structured. He grew to that, but he got there very, very quickly.
Yes, within a year and a half from starting in COVID, doing our course, that's what he got. So it shows that it's really possible. It's actually inspiring. It's amazing. So we'll definitely look at that in probably about 2 weeks or another time. So Miguel, fantastic to have you with us. Thank you very much. I'm sure you'll come back and we'll see you here a lot more. And to everyone else, you know, the links are there just to go and hear more about what we're doing, how we're doing, because at the ultimate, you know, base level, what we're wanting is for you to go out and also be successful, create that life that you love to live, whatever that means for you. That is up to you to decide, but it's about supporting you in achieving those goals. So from our side, thanks very much. Great to see you, and look forward to speaking to you again in 2 weeks' time with Airbnb Success. Thanks very much.